kind of hard to envision it right now when it is, as is often the case this time of year, when it's 55 and cloudy and windy and kind of chilly outside. You forget about the fact that the rites of spring, more so I'll just say the tradition of spring, is here, and that means hopefully again this year we get Pacers and Racers. But what we know for step number one, playoff basketball is upon us. And yes, I realized there was a show yesterday. It was largely discussed. Thank you for Derek for filling in yesterday. And to me, it still feels like a Monday because yesterday's like a haze, but more on that later. But nonetheless, we now know it is the Pacers and the Bucks. You've heard plenty of conversation about it. That conversation will continue here on Query and Company on this Tuesday edition that admittedly for me feels like a Monday on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Eddie Garrison is Corbin's filling in here very capably for the week. Eddie is in Seattle. Is that right, Corbin? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I think you need to go get more watermelon gummies.
So you're aware of this, right? Did he take orders by chance?
No, he didn't ask me, so I don't know if anybody else is getting any. He might just be stacking them up himself.
My understanding is I think they left this morning because he already sent me a text saying that he ran into a Chicago White Sox fan in the airport, and he did not know that those exist in the wild. And I'm like, yeah, they do. I don't know that I'm a fan of the White Sox. I go once a year, and last year I thought they were interesting because they were so bad. But nonetheless, Corbin Langenfelter is in, who also serves as the grand poobah of all of the behind-the-scenes for IndyCar Radio as well. That is his first year in doing that, but has been doing a flawless job filling in for Sam Rumsa. So Long Beach over the weekend is where I was, and now back in the saddle. And it was over the weekend when it was confirmed, not just that it was going to be Pacers-Bucks, but that we now know that game number one is literally game number one. 1 o'clock on Saturday is when things get underway. And first off, let me rephrase that. I love the afternoon game. Love it. Because partially it's nostalgically speaking, odd as it sounds, the NBA playoffs oftentimes, I think, especially on the weekend games, when you're getting the afternoon game, that feels like the marquee game. And I realize that it's probably not the marquee game. And to the majority of the country it probably feels like, wait a minute. Bucks and Pacers, Milwaukee and Indiana, okay. But if you look at it, it's like on a Saturday night, you're going out and you're doing stuff on a Saturday night, right? So, Pistons and Knicks or Timberwolves and Lakers gets kind of lost in the shuffle, does it not? Because the first round of the NBA playoffs, I don't think necessarily to the transcendent audience, it isn't still must-see television. But when it's in the middle of the day, that feels like the more prime time matchup because people are not going out and doing their Saturday evening activities, and they're like, okay, I'm going to watch this. And I have a concern, and I'm going to hedge a little bit here. For the last couple of weeks, when we knew the possibility of the Pacers in the playoffs in terms of, when I say possibility, their matchup, and we knew that it was like 99.9% certain that it was going to be either the Pistons or the Bucks. I have said repeatedly on this show that I thought absolutely it was that I would rather see Milwaukee than Detroit. And the reason for that was I just felt like Detroit, they're just kind of like young and dumb enough, I'm using lovingly there, young and immature enough to not know they're not supposed to be there. And I think last year that was the case, truthfully, with the Pacers. I think the Pacers last year when they had that breakthrough, part of that, yes, we've been honest about it. Part of how the Pacers got to the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago was conference attrition. There were teams around them that, New York was really banged up last year. Randall was, obviously he's not there this year, but Randall was out, and Tom Thibodeau had run them into the ground, and taking nothing away from Indiana, because going in there and winning in the Garden in a Game 7 was incredible, and especially the fashion and the manner in which they did it. And it was a great series. Obviously Milwaukee last year. Giannis was banged up. Giannis wasn't there for that series. So there were a number of things that came into play that went in the Pacers' favor. But one of the things that I think assisted Indiana a year ago was you had this group that had come together before your very eyes and kind of was naive to the fact that they weren't supposed to be there. And there is an element of danger in that with a young team. And I felt like Detroit had that, and therefore you were susceptible to overlooking them and Detroit getting some confidence about them and making some noise. But with all of that said, I've really looked closely for the last 2 weeks, and there's no reason I haven't, I should have been doing this for the last 2 months. None of this is new information or any sort of a revelation. But if you really look at what Giannis has done since the Damian Lillard injury, primarily, but down the home stretch when Milwaukee, there was a time there where it looked like Milwaukee was a foregone conclusion that they were going to be the 6 and maybe even fall beyond that. And Giannis basically said, and if you look at Giannis, he is clearly a physical specimen, but if you look at Giannis, he is the most broad-shouldered. He has very defined shoulders. Dwight Howard had kind of the same thing. The difference being that Giannis' shoulders are big enough that he can put an entire franchise on them. And he's done that before. I'm not saying he's about to do that again, but I think there's an element of danger in him because of the fact that he is that capable of being that strong as a player. And he does a number of different things. His ability to distribute and facilitate. Without Damian Lillard there, I almost, and this is going to sound crazy, Damian Lillard's injury and Damian Lillard not being available tentatively to start the series, first and foremost, is not a situation to take lightly. And the fact that he has a blood clot, you obviously don't wish that on anybody. So you want to see him back for the sake of his own health, because that's different than having a sore hamstring or, a calf strain. That's a very serious matter, and you certainly hope, from the human aspect of it, that everything's going to be okay with Damian Lillard. Now, Lillard is a great player, and he's a lightning in a bottle guy. This year, and I think it was the game where Halliburton hit the 3, the only game where the Pacers beat the Bucks, for that matter. Although there were some odd circumstances in a couple of those. Nesmith wasn't always available, and, there were other things that went into play there. But when I look at the Bucks-Pacers series, and I look at Damian Lillard on the floor, I look back to a game this year at the Fieldhouse where at some point they put Damian Lillard on the free throw line. And I remember saying to those around me, yeah, I would not want to put him on the free throw line. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he hasn't been active so far in this particular game, and he is a lightning in a bottle streak shooter. When Damian Lillard gets hot, he's as good as anybody. I mean, literally, he is a logo-type shooter. He can hit from anywhere. He's a Trae Young, Steph Curry-level shooter when he gets hot. And shooters, when they're not hot, you do not want them going to the free throw line or getting layups or open looks, because that allows them then to get in rhythm. And in rhythm, Lillard is very dangerous. However, even with that, there's a known element of it when he's there and with Giannis. And I know it's crazy to say you'd almost want Lillard to be out there. From the human standpoint, I do, just from a health standpoint. But with Lillard now not being part of the Milwaukee Bucks, it seems to me, and I'm not watching every possession of every play of every game for them, but it does seem to me that the Milwaukee Bucks without Lillard on the floor have basically said, okay, Giannis, you are now the guy. Everything's going through you. He's always been the guy. I get that. But there's no doubt now that everything is going through Giannis. And Giannis's ability not only to just bulldoze in and score at the basket or pull up, but his facilitation as a passer, getting people like Lopez involved, make him very dangerous. And there's nothing you can do. When Giannis decides he's going to do something, a large part of defending him, quite frankly, is winging a prayer, because there's a reason he's known as the Greek Freak. Very difficult to contend with. And when I look at him, I am worried that this is what I'm about to say is not an original thought to me. It's a very common thought. In any playoff series, you want to have the best player on the floor. You want to be the team that has the best player in that particular series. The best player, and I know it's dangerous to say here on Indianapolis radio, because Tyrese Halliburton is tremendous. And Pascal Siakam has played tremendously well. And Aaron Nesmith is a great X factor. And Miles Turner's a great rim protector. And Obi Toppin's a great Swiss Army knife and a great teammate. And Andrew Nembhard's a great defender. And Jarris Walker's a great growth before our eyes and a great story. But the best player in the series is Giannis. And I worry that he is a guy that can he carry his team to 4 wins based on him? That's going to be the question. Totality of roster, advantage Indiana. Superstar up top, take over a game, advantage Giannis. Can Halliburton take over a game? Yes. Can Siakam take over a game? Yes. Was Siakam the only player for Indiana that played well in the first game a year ago in this series? Yes. Did Indiana get shell-shocked in that game? Yes. Did they still win the series? Yes. But is Giannis a guy, if you had to pick one, that is capable of carrying his team for 4 of the 7 games to victory? I'm not saying he's the only in the series, but it certainly feels like it, right? It certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
But the series itself, look forward to it. Starts Saturday at 1 o'clock. Plenty of talk, including Rick Carlisle had some interesting comments that I'm going to play. I thought James Boyd this morning, as Rick Carlisle does each and every Tuesday, joining the guys on the Fan Morning Show, Carlisle offered great perspective, but James Boyd asked a question that I loved because it went right along with one of the things that I've talked a great deal about when it comes to the NBA playoffs. That's one of my favorite things, and we'll play that for you coming up on the show today. As a matter of fact, big show lined up. Stephen Holder going to join us 1 o'clock. NFL draft is on the horizon. Looking more and more, and again, what do we know about mock drafts? They're usually there to be mocked. But looking more and more like the fact that the Colts, if they decide to go tight end, which one would assume they will, I mean, you could literally stop someone in Tiananmen Square and they know that the Colts need to take a tight end, right? Everyone knows that that's the position right now that seemingly is of the biggest need. The Colts last year didn't have a single tight end in that receiver room that had 500 yards receiving. I mean, come on, right? So it's clearly a position they need to upgrade. And in addition to the fact that they need to upgrade it because of the personnel that's there, you also have to throw in the fact that if you are, and this remains to be seen, but if you are going with Anthony Richardson still as your starter and you're trying to develop him, he needs a safety net guy. He needs a bailout guy, especially if, let me tell you one thing about Richardson this year, if he's the starter, and I keep using the word if, keep in mind. But if Richardson gets the start, lot of time between now and then. But one of the things that the Colts want to see out of Anthony Richardson is they need him to develop consistently in his passing game. Now, Anthony Richardson is the anti-Andrew Nimhard. He's the anti-Andrew Nimhard. What is Andrew Nimhard best at, aside from his defense? Offensively speaking, Andrew Nimhard of the Pacers is the best mid-range guy they have. He's unbelievable. His mid-range jump shot's unbelievable. His pull-up from like 8 feet out is incredible. Andrew Nimhard's as good a mid-range jumper as anybody in the NBA. I'm not talking about threes. I'm not talking about like logo, Dame Lillard stuff. I'm talking about driving around and pulling up, or the ball rotates through from 10 feet. Andrew Nimhard, money. Anthony Richardson, on the other hand, logo threes, Richardson will hit that for you. He can throw it 65 yards through the air, falling on his back foot, hitting Alec Pierce in an open spot. Okay, fine. Improvisation, being T.J. McConnell, driving around for 3.5 minutes around the lane and then finally finding some opening and doing some dipsy-do reverse layup. Richardson can do that. Tuck the ball and run, he can go. Plays breaking down, Richardson sees an opening, turns a 2-yard sack into a 5-yard gain all day, right? He can do that. It's the mid-range game. It's the throwing an 8-yard pass. It's 3rd and 9. 3rd and 9 for the Colts with Anthony Richardson at center. Rigoberto Sanchez is already standing on the sideline with his helmet on because he knows he's about to come in because there's no mid-range game. Can't complete the 10-yard out at all. Home run ball, sure. Improvise, sure. Mid-range game, not so much. How do you facilitate that? There are two things that I think the Colts would like to see from Richardson as the final step of his evolution, of his growth, of his, yes, he can be the guy. One of those is exactly what I'm talking about, the footwork and the consistency of that hitting the marks in the mid-range game. And the other is the decision-making of not being Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck, I'm not questioning Luck's decision-making, but I think we can safely say, aside from an offensive line that was never built, part of what did in Andrew Luck was testing, using his body and his size to run and not, try to bowl over linebackers and just take constant hits to the point where his body broke down. The Colts have a PTSD about that, and so they want to make sure that Anthony Richardson is not trying to be a fullback that has the ability to throw the football. So what better way to do that than to get a player that, again, avoids a breakdown of play? They didn't have that the first two. He has not had that. If Richardson drops back and is looking over his reads and Josh Downs is covered, and then he looks around and Michael Pittman Jr. is trying to go long, but a defensive back is right on him. Alec Pierce hasn't gotten too deep yet and isn't open behind the defense. Richardson, as he's looking around, he's out of options now. He's gone through all his reads. Tuck and run, which he's very good at, but again, look at Andrew Luck. Only can do it for so many times, right? He doesn't have the intermediate bailout guy of just literally almost the dump pass to get out of a play. That's what a tight end does for you. Now, the interesting aspect of that is, for all of the times that we've talked about what appears to be the foregone conclusion that Tyler Warren of Penn State, a Dallas Clark hybrid, a reincarnated, whatever else, and it was like, that's the guy, right? That's the guy. But Tyler Warren looks more and more now like a Chicago or somebody else is going to leapfrog in front into the top 10 or back half of the top 10, and now he's off the board. So then you go to, instead of Boardwalk, you got to go to Park Place. Instead of Lamborghini, you go Ferrari. Still pretty good. and Colston Loveland from Michigan, who it looks like is going to be there around that time slot. What I have also said with that, if you are staying at 14, and if Loveland's there, then you probably take that guy, except for this. If there is another position of dire need for the Colts, and I hate to say it, pass rush, because it's been mentioned, pass rush, every year under Chris Ballard since the beginning of time, that pass rush is an area where seemingly every year it's like, no, this is the guy, this is now finally taken care of. Liatu Latu showed some bursts. Kwity Paye, I think we can just, we can say now, he's a guy. He's just a guy, right? If there's a dynamic pass rusher or a really good, bigger defensive back that they feel they can plug and play, is that the route that they go? What they then have to ask themselves, that you've heard me lay out a number of times, is this. You have to write down basically on a sheet of paper, okay, let's say Loveland is not available or you decide to pass on him. Let's say Loveland's even there. If Loveland's there, let's say Warren's gone, but Loveland's on the board, and you have Loveland rated as an 8.2. I'm literally just throwing out a number if you're Chris Ballard, an 8.2. And then you look at round number 2 and you go, but the next group of tight ends, they're all a 7.9. If there's a defensive back or, dare I say it, pass rush, one of those guys available at 14, that both score at an 8.5, and at that position you dip down to 6.8 in round number 2, then do you go ahead and take care of that need first, even though it may not be as glaring a need as tight end, but the drop-off is bigger on what you have to then go get in rounds 2 and 3. So do you take round number 1 based on the legitimacy and the score and the quality of prospect for you at round number 1, or do you then factor in what you take based on the drop-off of what you would have to go to if you take that position later? And that's something that only Chris Ballard and their strategy will know. And speaking of drafts, the Fever yesterday, WNBA draft, 3 players. It does feel, Corbin, does it not? Paige Beckers is a fabulous player. Mm-hmm. And I think, speaking of Boardwalk Park Place, and this is great for women's basketball. I love the fact now that with women's basketball, we are seemingly annually seeing young women that are entering the WNBA draft that are, transitional franchise players, right? Like generational talents.
Yeah.
And you've got them now in back-to-back years. But clearly, when you are coming off of the Caitlin Clark draft and the momentum that the Fever had, and then the fact that they obviously surrendered, they had no first-round pick because it was used in the Sophie Cunningham trade, you think to yourself, like, well, okay, it's not as exciting. But you also go into your mindset of the NBA draft of, okay, if somebody's a second-round pick, you're thinking to yourself, well, they were like the 40th player taken. Well, no. I mean, there are fewer teams, right? Mm-hmm. I thought what they did yesterday and what they did really well was take care of several different needs. For example, if you look at the fact that their best rim protector, their best shot-blocking defender, okay, they lose in the expansion draft. So they go out, and with their first available pick, and Michaela Timpson out of Florida State, they take a player that not only is a power forward that seemingly has a continued to solidify and grow offensive game, but an outstanding rim protector, and gives them a little bit more force on the inside. Additionally, their backcourt defense is an area that I think that they felt like needed to be shored up or strengthened, and I think they took care of that in their second pick with Bree Hall. I was going to say round number 2, but they're both second rounders. Bree Hall out of South Carolina, who outside shooter and can hit in transition. Timpson also can play a little in transition. When you've got Caitlin Clark, you have to factor that into consideration. But also, I think trailing a play or running in transition and hitting a three is something that Hall can do. And then the forward they took out of Gonzaga, I mean, the all-time leading scorer in Gonzaga women's basketball history. Does that mean that I know a lot about Yvonne? I think I'm saying it right. Yvonne Jim. No. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I sat here and said what I do know is that is a position, especially with the acquisition in the draft of Timpson, where I think they have a lot there. So probably going to be difficult to make that roster there. But again, I thought two areas where they needed to address, they did, and it's exciting. And when you think about the offseason, was no offseason for Caitlin Clark because anywhere you turned, there was Caitlin Clark in the news, which is a good thing for the Fever, an absolutely good thing. Now, back to the Pacers and something that was said this morning. Something I love about the playoffs, love it. And Rick Carlisle this morning talked a little bit about it, on whether or not it's something that we're going to see right away in round number one, and the challenge in seeing probably one of the 5 best players on the planet right now. You'll hear from Rick Carlisle when we come back from what he said this morning on the morning show. Again, loaded show for you today. Stephen Holder going to join us, Scott Agnes as well, and they say you should never meet your heroes. But I actually did in Long Beach, one of them. I'll tell that story as well. I've always said that I enjoy about the NBA playoffs is it's fascinating how the series, no matter what series it is, I mean, you take any two teams, they take on a life of their own and the script changes. It was always so fun for me to cover the day-to-day of a series and, travel with the team to cover games, because if there's 7 games, every game's different. The chess match that would take place and the seemingly, at least from the outside, as I would be watching it, of trying to reinvent, teams would try to reinvent kind of who they are from one game to the next based on what was going to work, and, the shift of, okay, game 1, you win a game with your guard play, and then game 2, that guard play is taken away, so now you've got to go more in the interior and et cetera. And the maneuverability of that, to me, has always been fun to watch. Also, in a playoff series, you always want to have the best player on the floor. I mean, your chance of winning a series goes up exponentially when you have on the team the best player on the floor. Milwaukee probably does have that. Not probably, they do in totality. Sure, there are going to be games where Halliburton's the best player on the floor, or Siakam, but the law of averages says that Giannis is the best player on the floor. This morning, Rick Carlisle, as he does each and every Tuesday, joined the Fan Morning Show with Jeff Rickard, Kevin Bowen, and James Boyd, and talked about not only the challenge of Giannis, but I thought James Boyd asked a fantastic question, and that is, how do you balance pushing all in on who you are with the wrinkles of the chess match that I'm talking about? And I thought Carlisle gave very, very good insight into areas where Indiana feels that they're at strength and how much you balance that with how they need to adjust, as well as playing with Giannis. Here's Rick Carlisle from this morning on this radio station.
Transition defense, and I've told you guys this during the years. Transition D is probably as important a defensive coverage as we have. And, a lot of people look at that and say, well, of course you got to get back, but getting back and finding a man, not just your man, and making sure that everyone is covered is a really big deal. So, look, those basics are going to be very important. Plus, we'll get to, tune up some other things this week, maybe do a few tweaks here and there, but this is not going to be about gimmicks. This is going to be about us bearing down and executing our style to the highest possible level we can.
Rick, to that point, and maybe can you expand on it a bit, what is the balance of remaining who you are, but also realizing that it is a matchup, and the playoff matchup, seeing a team for 2 weeks is different than seeing them for 2 or 3 times over an extended period of time throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of adjusting, I would assume, back and forth. You got a guy like Giannis, and, right now, against double teams, I mean, he is as good as anyone in the league. I mean, he's right up there with Jokic just in terms of his execution against double teams in the last 6 or 7 games. A guy like that averaging 13 assists a game over a stretch, of must-win games. I mean, that's impressive. So it isn't that you just go get the ball out of his hands every single time, because he is throwing these darts, these cross-court darts to the opposite corner for threes, and he's throwing, darts to guys like Lopez dive into the hoop and stuff like that. So, we're going to have to be very mindful about everything that's going on. There are probably going to be stretches where we're going to have to try to play him straight up, which is, it's really in the last 7 or 8 years has been almost impossible. But again, it's going to come down to our team versus their team. But they've got a guy that's really, every year he's in the MVP conversation. So he's a big challenge.
Look, I look forward to it. It's going to be fun. Now, the latest in terms of Damian Lillard, by the way, is, I think there was the thought when Damian Lillard went went down with his injury. Well, I say injury with blood clots. And again, I want to be very clear. I mean, that's scary stuff for certain. But the Bucs issued the following today. By the way, did you pay your taxes, Corbin? You got what do you got? Here's the thing. What's the deadline? If you do it online, does it just have to be by 11:59 tonight?
Maybe.
I paid mine online, and it's even though it's come out of my account, it still shows when I go online to my account as pending. And I did it a while ago. I'm curious about that, by the way.
Might be getting an audit.
No kidding, right? That may be the case. Who knows, right?
Had an extra zero there when you shouldn't have.
That's right. The Milwaukee Bucks with the following update. Damian Lillard has made significant improvement on his deep vein thrombosis in his right calf. He will continue to increase his on-court basketball activity. Damian's most recent weekly scan shows that his injury has significantly improved, which will enable him to move ahead safely with increased basketball activity, said Bucks general manager John Horst. Damian's health remains our number one priority. We have followed strict protocols and will continue to do so. We are pleased with the positive news about Damian's progress. The team will continue to provide updates as appropriate. That from just about 15 minutes ago, as a matter of fact. Shams reporting Milwaukee Bucks star Damian Lillard will miss the start of the NBA playoffs. The Bucks play Game 1 of the first round against the Pacers on Saturday. He has been sidelined since March 18th, and doctors continue to monitor his progress for clearance. He sent that before the Bucks then issued that statement. So the Bucks statement, and this feels actually a little bit like Giannis a year ago in terms of just the day-to-day of trying to navigate through the situations and the availability. But that's where things stand right now with Damian Lillard. Long Beach was the weekend, of course, for IndyCar, and that means one of two things. Number one, always means a great race, historic Kyle Kirkwood getting the win. Number two, it also means venturing out in Los Angeles, which is exactly what I did. And got to meet somebody that, as a kid, I never would have thought I would meet. But I did meet him over the weekend. I'll tell you who it was and how it went next. California for the 50th Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach, which is a great, great, great event. I mean, I love it. I love being out there. The race itself is always good. It was a good race with Kyle Kirkwood winning from pole, but it was kind of a crazy race because of all these different strategies that take place with pit sequencing and et cetera. And admittedly, when calling a turn in races like that, it can be, for me, I don't mean for the, hopefully not for the listener, I don't know, but it can get confusing because I'm out there and I'm like, wait a minute, so I don't have like a timing and scoring in front of me. So to know when people are on different pit sequencing and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, so-and-so is in the lead, but are they really in the lead, or is it because they have yet to pit and so they're kind of falsely in the lead? But nonetheless, exciting race, fun race, and Long Beach is just the best. I love Southern California. So we got done very early on Saturday after qualifying. We were done at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I know that I'm weird. Most people think I'm weird because I will visit graveyards. I did not visit graveyards. But I do get like this weird thing of I love in L.A., a billion different movies were filmed in Los Angeles, right? In TV shows and whatever else. So when I have time to venture out, a lot of times I'll say, well, I'm going to go venture out and try to find different things. This year, my fascination was the movie. I have no idea why. But I always, in the original movie Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis from 1978, I always found it funny because in one of the scenes, you can see her walking on Halloween morning when Tommy, the little kid that she ends up having to, that she's the babysitter for, in the daytime when she's walking Tommy to school and you can see palm trees. And you're like, wait a minute, that's Haddonfield, Illinois doesn't have palm trees. So I knew it was in Southern California, so I decided to try to find out the filming locations of the movie Halloween. And there is the famous scene when she is coming home from school with Annie. Lori and Annie are walking home from school, and Michael Myers has already started his stalking of Lori. And the first time that she really notices him is when he is hiding behind the line of shrubs on the street. So I started looking at the filming locations and found out that the movie was filmed in South Pasadena, which is just outside of Los Angeles, obviously not far from the Rose Bowl. And the first house that I went to was that of where the shrub line is, the row of bushes where she's walking with Annie. And then I go to the house, I put the address in, I go to it. It's in a very nice neighborhood in South Pasadena. Not Beverly Hills level nice, but a nice neighborhood. And I parked the car. It was, 2:30 in the afternoon on a beautiful sun-splashed Saturday, not a cloud in the sky, 70 degrees, typical Southern California. I parked the car, and I'm walking, and I'm like, okay, it's one of these houses. And then it's so incredibly obvious. It's like, oh, my gosh, there's the row of bushes, which looks, it's almost 50 years later, and the row of bushes is still there, still perfectly squared off and manicured. And the neighbor, the woman who lives in the house, well, I guess the shrubs divides two different yards. So the woman that lived in the first of the two houses was out in the front yard. Could not have been nicer. And was like, yeah, she obviously could tell what I was doing. She's like, yeah, there's the shrub from Halloween. She's like, that's the one. And I'm like, okay. And so she says to me, she goes, I said, well, does it get annoying with people like me showing up? And she's like, it's so much fun. She's like, it's great. We actually have, and she pointed to the house across the street. She said, Mark over there does a thing on Halloween where he has kind of a temporary little holding area because so many people come to take pictures that we do like cider and stuff across the street, and then we put a pumpkin out. And she's like, it is so much fun, and everybody has fun with it on the street, which is cool. As I'm talking to her, another car parks, and a guy gets out. So there's two people now that are weird. And this guy from Georgia shows up, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to a concert tonight at Whiskey A Go-Go, but I wanted to see the filming locations, but I've been here before. So he then informed me, he's like, well, you realize that the house right behind where you are, so now two houses down, That was the house that was used in the external shots of Mama's Family, Vicki Lawrence's sitcom television show, which is arguably the cheesiest and worst, most low-budget sitcom of the 80s. I thought it was terrible. But nonetheless, it's like, that's cool. So he knew where, and I was getting ready to just look up all the addresses, but he was like Wikipedia for me. And he goes, no. I'll just tell you right now. Michael Myers' house is around the corner. The hardware store where Michael Myers breaks in is actually it's now a cafe on a corner. It's all literally in a 2-block area. And then the house that is used in Pee-wee's Big Adventure is on the same block as well. All in this completely, like, very nice but nondescript neighborhood in South Pasadena. The elementary school that Tommy goes to where he falls on the pumpkin at the beginning of Halloween, it's all right there. So I drove around. You could literally go from one spot to the next, to the next, to the next in 15 minutes. I mean, it's all within a 10-square-block area. So I did that. That was cool and very enjoyable. And I don't know. I have this weird fascination where if I see something enough times, I then become fascinated with wanting to see it in person and try to envision the filming of it and, what all took place in that spot and in that moment. So all of that was cool. But then on Sunday, I'm at the racetrack. Before the race began at, I can't record, what time did we go on the air? 1 o'clock, 1 Pacific, right?
Yeah, 1 Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern.
So I got to the track at like 11:30. And I run into a buddy of mine, Brian Marks, who works kind of as a freelancer, getting sponsorship and other such things for different teams, but primarily works in partnership with Rahal Letterman Lanigan. And so I see Brian, and he says, oh, yeah, I'm just over here hanging out with my buddy Chris. I said, oh, okay, that's cool. And he goes, yeah. He goes, well, Chris he's a huge race fan. He goes, you would know him from his previous career. What's that? He goes, well, he owns a furniture company now and does a couple of different things. Super dude. I've known him for years. We're good buddies. And he goes, here, you can come meet him. So we go over, and Chris is Christopher Knight, which better known, pork chops and applesauce. Peter Brady. So I'm like, now listen, when I did a radio show in high school on WJL, your Panther Sports Connection, 89.3 at North Central, I did an entire segment every day for forever of Impossible Brady trivia. I fancy myself as the aficionado of trivia about the Brady Bunch. And so now I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at him, I'm like, this is Peter Brady. Voice change, time to change, pork chops and applesauce, you name it. But I don't want to, try to stump Peter Brady on Impossible Brady trivia. Like, for example, what's the one time that one of his siblings referred to him on the show as Pete, not Peter, that kind of thing. So I walk up, and I'm like, oh, hey, man, how's it going? So now I'm like, okay, well, what do I ask Peter Brady about, right? Or Christopher Knight, as he's known. So the one thing I asked him, I said, okay, I'm curious of this. When you watch the Brady Bunch and you see a rerun of it, or it's on YouTube, now it would be harder. It used to be, it was on syndication everywhere. But when you are seeing it, and I recall asking this to, I'm trying to think of who else I've asked this. Oh, I asked this question to Willie Ames as well, who was on 8 is Enough and Charles in Charge. But I said, when you see a scene, do you see it just like I do as a television scene, or do you actually recall, and in your mind you're envisioning when you were filming it, and you're thinking about, and you can envision in your brain as you're watching it, the stuff that was off to the side and the people that were in the background and whatever else? And he said, no, actually, I probably would have in the regard that you're talking about. And he said, but now that the Brady Bunch house, which they completely renovated for an HGTV show a couple of years ago, they completely renovated the actual house where they filmed the exteriors. The house finally went up for sale, and HGTV bought it so that they could do a reality show renovation of it to make it look exactly to scale as the Brady Bunch house looked on television. And he said, once we got done doing that and I was able to tangibly walk through an actual version of the house, now, he's like, it's weird. Now, all of a sudden, I don't see it as a set anymore. It's like literally watching myself in a house because I've been in that house so many times. And then he said to me, and I have to admit, of the weird, strange perks of my Walter Mitty Forrest Gump life that I've lived, this is the coolest. I don't know that it will ever come to fruition, but to me, this is the coolest. So Christopher Knight, after we talked for probably 30 minutes, and he told me that Mike Lukenland, who played Bobby Brady, Mike Lukenland's father was a huge race fan. And so they, in the 60s, 1968 to 74, whatever it was when they were doing that show, 73, they were Christopher Knight and then Mike Lukenland's father on the set. They were huge fans of the Indy 500 and of racing in general in Southern California. So we talked about racing for a great deal, but then when we were talking about the show, Christopher Knight said this to me, and I don't know if this will ever come to fruition, but if it does, then it will be like the pinnacle of my life. He said, well, now that the house has been renovated, I have, and he didn't say that he owns it. I don't know who, he kind of insinuated that, but whoever does own the house now, he apparently has very close proximity or access to. And he said, next year when you come out for Long Beach, he goes, I kid you not, I'm being totally serious. Get a hold of me the day before, and I'll take you to the house, and we will actually go into the kitchen. And he's like, and I will make you pork chops and applesauce. Let me tell you, Corbin, you're too young a fella to get the reference, I realize. But I'm telling you right now, anybody that's like 52 or over is like, that's the cheesiest and most non-glamorous, but at the same time, absolute coolest thing of all time. And if I could go and have Peter Brady make me pork chops and applesauce in the Brady Bunch house, die a happy man. I'm just telling you that. Then, and I've had a very charmed existence. That would be the pinnacle. Stephen Holder going to join us next. I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that conversation. We'll talk NFL draft, and we'll do it with the Colts beat writer from ESPN next. the hits, man. Listen, that Brady bunch, that Greg Brady, man, he knew exactly how to write in that voice change for Peter, right? No, puberty wasn't standing in the way of the silver platters. Greg's like, let's go. We'll just write in Peter's voice cracking right there on Time to Change. I can tell you that after meeting Peter Brady over the weekend, his voice did not change. Or his voice did not crack. I mean, it's changed. He's all good, right? 70 years old, puberty train, left the station, no problems. Joining us now, and I'm sure probably bewildered to be doing so based on that segue. You read his work, of course, at ESPN.com, as well as hearing him on this radio station, Stephen Holder, just before the NFL draft upcoming. Things begin a week from Thursday. Stephen, did you watch the Brady Bunch at all as a kid?
I was hoping you would go there because I absolutely did. And, you know, you and I are roughly the same generation. We are the same generation, right? So we grew up at a time when there were a lot fewer TV channels, right? And so the summertime for me was that. It was those morning reruns all morning long, you know, till maybe like lunchtime. You're just watching old shows and reruns of old shows, I should say. So I would say in my childhood, just off the top of my head, the shows that I have probably seen every episode of, I don't remember them that well because it was like, you know, this is 40 years ago. But
right.
The shows that I have seen probably every episode of would be perhaps the Brady Bunch, and the other one I'm thinking is Chips, which was my favorite all-time show.
Yeah. I remember when Eric Estrada got into a motorcycle crash, and like people were like waiting around the radio for updates on the regular basis as to whether or not he was going to survive such a traumatic event. Right? It was a huge deal.
You know what else happened on that show that's never happened to me is they pull somebody over for speeding or what have you, and then some guy comes driving like a bat out of hell and tearing up the road, and they say, all right, screw this ticket. We're going to go get that guy. That's never happened to me.
Of course,
I always
right?
get the ticket.
You know, the other thing, too, and maybe – I mean, I was just in California and spent plenty of time on two things that I've never understood here. Why in California are the interstates known as the? Like in Indianapolis, we don't say you got to take the 465 or the 65, right?
Right.
But L.A., everything is the. Like, so I was on the 405 and the 110. I never, saw state troopers on Harleys, okay? I mean, they have that in Indy, obviously. And number two, when you are, I've told you this before, when you do hear a bike in traffic in L.A., it's zipping between the cars, which is terrifying. You ever notice that?
Oh, for sure. Now, I can attest to having seen many CHP officers on motorcycles out there. So that's my personal experience. The other comment I have is I actually have a thought on why they call it the 405 or the 5 and what have you. It's because it's the only place in the country with freeways like that. Okay, it's the 405 is a sight unto itself. Okay, you have to experience it. That's why it's called the 405, because it's the only damn one like it.
That's fair.
It's unbelievable. You know, it can take you 30 minutes to go 2 exits, right? So there's nothing else in the country like that. So I don't know. That's just my theory on it. It's like, you know what? It's unmatched in the worst possible way.
Do you want to know? A query skill set that I have, and we'll get to the NFL draft here in just a second with Steven, I promise.
No, that can wait.
Do you know? And I don't know how old I was when this was explained to me, Steven. You know this. I know that you know this, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. For example, Steven, I'm going to put you on the spot with a trivia question here. You ready?
Not the first time. Go ahead.
Let's say something terrible happens to you. You're kidnapped. You're put in the trunk of a car. Okay, you're driven. You have no idea how long you've been out. Whatever else, the person finally just decides that the chase is over with. They get out. They abandon the car. You eventually work your way out of the trunk of the car. You look at the closest sign that you see for an interstate, and give me a 2-digit number off the top of your head, Steven, that is not an interstate number. Just give me a number off the top of your head.
Okay, just like any number
yes.
or a road?
Okay, 39.
39.
So you look and you see, you're like, okay, all I know is that I'm on Interstate 39. Do you know what direction that interstate is going?
I actually know the answer to this. This is a great trivia question, and everybody should know this.
Correct. Everybody should know this.
Yes. If I remember correctly, odd-numbered interstates, let me think, go north to south.
Correct.
And evens go east to west.
Correct.
Right?
That is correct. Now.
Yeah. So I'm from Florida. We pretty much only have north and south, right? You can't go very much. Well, you have I-4, but other than that, you're going north and south. So 75, 95, et cetera.
Correct. Okay, now, how about this? You ready?
Yeah.
You have no idea where you are, but you look, and it is a three-digit numbers. What does that tell you?
It's an offshoot probably from a mainline interstate is my understanding of that.
Correct. It is what it is it's a bypass that is intersected by the second and third number. So in Indianapolis, we have 465 because it's a three-digit number, meaning that it is a bypass that is intersected by Interstate 65.
There you go. That which brings us to the 405.
Correct. It is intersected
not
by the 5. Right.
Not 405. The 405.
That's correct. Yes. Now, I will tell you this one last fun fact about the Brady Bunch since you watched Stephen Holder for the 8 people that are still listening. The Christopher Knight, known as Peter Brady, the actor, I met him at Long Beach over the weekend. We had a very long conversation that included some Brady Bunch conversation, which was fascinating. And he did inform me there is a scene in the Brady Bunch. And I went back and looked, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, he's right. There's a scene in the Brady Bunch where the Brady Bunch family gets a trampoline. And they are all trying out the trampoline. They're trying to get Bobby to overcome his fear of heights. And this was one of, the Brady parents' master strokes of parenting. So they have this trampoline, and Christopher Knight said to me, he goes, go back and watch that. When I'm jumping on the trampoline, we were just ad-libbing the lines, and Mrs. Brady, Florence Henderson, of course, but Mrs. Brady says as he's jumping on the trampoline, wow, you go, Chris. And they left it in the show. They did not, nobody noticed it, and they left it in the show. And then later, when Jan gets up, Greg Brady says, give it a try, Eve. So there you go.
And they're both those references are in the show?
Correct. Both of them were left in. They did not catch it in editing. How about them apples or applesauce with pork chops? All right,
what
Stephen.
What kind of two-bit operation was that? But anyway, that's so.
Listen, they had an AstroTurf yard, Stephen. You got to suspend reality a little bit here, right? I mean, come on.
That's pretty good. That's funny. Well, I did learn something today. That is definitely something I did not expect to learn.
Well, I hate to tell you this also, but Tiger, the dog in the Brady Bunch, the original Tiger, unfortunately, was didn't make it through. He was hit by a car on the set. And the final scene where they have to give Tiger away, they went to the Humane Society of Los Angeles and got a dog that looked like Tiger, but apparently was like on meth, and had to give him a collar and a bunch of sedatives in order to film the final scene.
It's amazing that show ever made it to the air with all that's going on there, man.
Yeah. PETA was not as active back in those days. Okay, so speaking of animals, let's talk about Colts and the draft upcoming week from Thursday. Looking more and more, Stephen, it would seem, and we never know through mock drafts, but I know ESPN.com, for example, does have a column right now about prognostication of pick. And it's looking more and more like if they want to go tight end, if they stick where they are, they may not get the very first dib at one, correct?
That is definitely a realistic possibility, probably a strong possibility. And, it is interesting, right? Because I explained this to JMV last night, and generally speaking, tight ends are not a real popular choice among like the top 10 selections. That very rarely happens, in fact. 2 tight ends going really early literally never happens. And for those who heard that show, this will be redundant, but I'll repeat the stat here that I put in the story that ran yesterday. I went back and did some research, and I could only find, going back to 1973, I had to go all the way back to 1973, before I was born.
The final year of the Brady Bunch, by the way. That's when the Brady Bunch went off the air. What a legendary landmark year.
There you go. It was about the time you were born, in fact, I think.
That's right.
So, anyway, 1973 was the last time, okay, the Colts picked 14. The last time 2 tight ends were picked within the first 14 picks, was 1973. Yeah, tight ends went 6th and 7th. So that gives you some context on how rare it is to have two elite tight end prospects like in the top half of the first round. It literally never happens. So, or hasn't happened in, several generations. So, this is an interesting situation, right? You've got two picks or two prospects here, Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland, who, if the Colts don't get first, if they prefer Tyler Warren and he's gone, which could happen, they'll have to make a decision on whether they want to force the Colson Loveland pick or whether they think they can address the tight end need somewhere else later in the draft, which is possible. And I shouldn't have used the word force the Loveland pick because they might actually like him very much. But that's just going to be the question. Like, does he fit their need, and can they live with getting the second choice at that position in this draft?
By the way, Charlie Young and Paul Seymour, right?
I believe that's right. It was definitely Seymour. Let me look here. I actually wrote it, and I can't remember because it's been so many years. Yes. You knew that, or you just
come on, Stephen?
Did you look that up?
Listen, Stephen. You've sat next to me at NBA games, correct?
You have a lot of information in that heading. That's true.
I mean,
we'll just leave it at that.
like deep down, do you ever, have you ever gone home from a Pacer game and thought to yourself, the game was fun, but the access to that information was actually what was really it was all about, right? Right?
It's definitely fascinating. Let's say that.
No, I did look it up, by the way.
All right. No, but that's pretty cool, though. They went 6th and 7th, which is just, unheard of at that position. So that was interesting.
As we move along here, and, sometimes these things go through ebb and flow. Stephen Holder's our guest from ESPN.com. As we move along, Stephen, are we starting to find that this draft may be richer in one position than, let's say, pre-combine we realized, or maybe even weaker at a certain position than we had originally thought?
Good question. I think that I don't know that opinions have changed drastically. I would say what's interesting is maybe the quarterback thing because there was early on in this draft process there was this thought that these quarterbacks could go bang bang right at the top. That's not shaping up to be the case. Cam Ward's probably going to be the number one pick. We do know that. We don't know where Shedeur Sanders is going to go. That's really hard to predict. But, there's a chance that no one else gets picked in the first round. As much as this draft was not expected to be, a rich quarterback draft, that's in today's landscape where quarterbacks are so overvalued in the draft. They just are because they're so hard to acquire. That would be a pretty remarkable thing. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, just given the landscape today at quarterback, that really says something. I don't know if this specifically answers the question, but it's interesting to me. Even in the worst quarterback years, we've seen sometimes, an additional guy sneak in the first round or something. So we'll see what happens there. But that speaks to, I think, just what this quarterback class looks like.
And pardon my asking this is only if you know it off the top of your head, I'm kind of looking right here. Where did the Giants select third, right? They're inside the top 5?
Right.
Because Sanders is apparently working out for the Giants today.
That is true, yes.
Does he look like to you a top 5 quarterback, a top 5 player?
I think in a different draft, he's probably not. But I think he is look, I am not a scouting director, but just looking at the eye test, right? What do I see with Shedeur Sanders? If my opinion means anything to anybody, this is what I'd say. I think the assessment that he is good but not spectacular at anything is a very apt description. But I also don't think that's terrible. Okay, there are quarterbacks out there who have certainly an elite trait here and there. And that always helps, right? You look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen, just superior athlete, huge arm, really obvious when you watch them. Those things are obvious. And when you watch Shedeur Sanders, I don't know that that's true. I don't know that anything necessarily jumps out at you, but his accuracy is pretty good. And I think I can go back to like Frank Reich, for example, who, look, for all of his faults maybe, and from the fan base, the one thing he really understood was quarterbacks. He did understand that position. He played that position, and so I take his opinion very strongly on quarterbacks. And the one thing he said is, he says, if the guy's accurate, I can work with the rest of it. That was the thing he valued the most. Like, is he accurate? Because that's the thing you can't teach. So that's the good thing, is Shedeur Sanders has that, and the rest of it, he's actually at a pretty high floor. In the rest of it, he's just not special necessarily. Okay, but if he can improve on those other areas, you could really have something there, right? So I think he has a good chance to succeed, but it's got to be in the right place, right time, right pieces around him, the right coach. I do think he has a chance to have a lot of success, but it is true, right? He is not a guy that jumps off the screen, particularly in today's NFL, where the quarterbacks now generally they're dual threat quarterbacks. He's not, so he's going to have to win from the pocket, and he's going to have to win with just being extremely efficient and really accurate and all those things, which I think he has a chance to be.
Stephen, you remember Alfred Williams, right? The linebacker?
Yes.
Really good player. 2-time All-American at Colorado, right? Really
Right.
good player and a good pro. Obviously, you remember Cordell Stewart, correct?
Absolutely.
Dynamic, to somewhat transitional player, right? Because he was kind of the first, slash, coming into the league and playing, both two different positions. I'm assuming that you still remember the prolific playing career of Eric Bieniemy, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Michael Westbrook.
That was a heck of a generation over there, by the way.
You remember Westbrook, right?
Yeah.
He caught the Hail Mary from Cordell Stewart. Do you know what none of those guys have in common that Shedeur Sanders is about to have that separates him from the rest of those?
Is this the jersey retirement situation?
Correct. They're retiring Shedeur Sanders' jersey number. None of those players that I just mentioned. Alfred Williams, 2-time All-American. Cordell Stewart, Eric Bieniemy, Michael Westbrook. Great players, national championship runner-up team. None of those players have their jerseys retired. Shedeur Sanders is about to have his jersey retired. Thoughts?
And Travis Hunter as well, I believe.
Hunter, I understand. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. And Rashawn Salam is another one that has his number retired. But
So the only other player to have his jersey retired is Rashawn Salam. Is that right?
no, there are. I looked it up today. There are 5,
okay.
I believe. Let me look up
Okay.
the list of those players. But your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, he's the only one of those to wear a Rolex while playing on the field, though, I bet. or for that matter, I don't know if he wore a Rolex, but no, he definitely wore a Rolex, definitely. And the other thing he did was he wore at least a $50,000 chain on the field, which, hey, if that's your thing, go for it. But so he definitely set himself apart in that regard. So I don't know, man. I guess he's unforgettable, right? In many ways. Apparently.
Okay, Byron White, who was a quarterback in 1936 and 1937.
I wasn't there.
Joe Romig, offensive guard from 59 to 61. Bobby Anderson, running back from 67 to 69. Rashawn Salam, Heisman Trophy winner. Sanders and Hunter. There is your list of all-time Colorado retired jersey numbers.
All right. So did you say Byron White?
Yes.
Am I right? I just Googled this guy as we're talking. Did this guy end up serving on the Supreme Court or something? Is this right? Well, you're going to have to follow up on this because this is definitely up your alley.
Quarterback and halfback Byron White wore number 24 from 1936 to 37 for the Buffs. He was an All-American running back for Colorado and led the Buffaloes to an undefeated season that year. He is a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. His jersey was retired on November 3rd of 1938 near the end of the following season and was very controversial amongst two guys who then got done talking about Brady Bunch trivia on a radio program. He is now, hold on. Let's see if that's. You would think that they would have mentioned that right there, right?
I mean, you would think. This guy, I'm looking at Wikipedia, which is obviously
All-knowing.
infallible. This guy, yes, he served on the Supreme Court.
You are correct. By the way,
yeah.
it is the same one. He was appointed to the Supreme Court. He was appointed by John Kennedy to the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah. This is a hell of a fun fact. Okay.
Heisman Trophy runner-up, right?
There's zero chance anyone's still listening, but this is really fascinating, at least to me. So,
how about okay? Yeah, he played. Well, here's the thing: he played for the Detroit Lions and then went to Yale Law School. Most people say he would have stuck with his career, except for he played for the Detroit Lions. That's why he went to Yale Law School, right?
They scare everybody away up there.
That's right. If you play for the Detroit Lions, you either end up on Webster or the Supreme Court. It's one of the two, right?
Man, that's amazing. He was succeeded, by the way, on the court by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So he must have served a long time.
Wow.
Anyway,
okay.
This is what's interesting about this. So to get your number retired at Colorado, you had to be an incredible player and serve on the Supreme Court.
That's right. That's exactly right. Right?
But Shedeur Sanders, you're good. Go ahead, buddy. So,
it is
that's
something,
a hell of an accomplishment.
Would Shedeur Sanders have his number retired if his dad was not the coach?
I say no. Travis Hunter, go for it for sure. I mean, the Heisman Trophy winner. Have they? I don't even know how many they have had in.
Rashawn Salam is the only
history.
other.
So there you go. Okay. So
I mean, you could make the argument that those two guys. I will say this: you could make a very compelling argument that those two players put Colorado back on the map and got relevancy back to that program.
They did. They did do that. There's no question. I don't have a problem with it necessarily. I think it is an interesting conversation, though. Look, we'll see. I do think in terms of, going beyond the field, there was impact beyond the field, right? Certainly, just by Deion showing up and bringing those two guys with him, they had a lot of impact that goes beyond what happened between the lines. So that part, I think, if you want to consider that, I'm okay with that. But I think it's a fun debate for sure.
Lastly, Stephen, your draft coverage will involve exactly what? I mean, I'm sure we'll talk to you between now and then, but what all will you guys be doing draft-wise in general?
Yeah, so one of the things we will do is collectively, me and my colleagues do a mock draft we'll commence that later this week, and then there's actually a television component with that too. So we'll team with Mike Tannenbaum, and he'll give his analysis on each pick and all that. So I think that runs, I believe, next Tuesday afternoon. So I'll tweet those details out later. But that'll be interesting. It'll run online. It'll run on TV as well. And we'll see if I can avoid embarrassing myself. I'm not going to dive too deep into the draft prior to the draft, though, because I have a little basketball duty coming up. So got some Pacers playoffs to cover. So that'll be a nice little diversion.
Oh, you're covering that? That's cool.
I am, absolutely. So yeah.
And did you cover it last year?
I did not. I think I'm filling in for. I think they're shorthanded, so that's how they got to me. But I mean, I'm not on the NBA staff, obviously. But I've covered basketball before. I get the concept, right? Ball goes in the hoop. It's not that hard.
It's going to be a good series. I'm a little worried about it because I think Giannis is capable, and he has been playing at level of capable of carrying his team for a bit. But we'll see, right?
Yeah, he has. I would say this for the Pacers, man. Like their ability to close out tough games lately has been really impressive. They have shown, I think, just a mettle and a moxie in those crunch moments that I was not sure they had. They've shown that. So we'll see if that carries over, but I think that tells you something.
By the way, Byron White upheld the use of affirmative action by vote, but also dissented on Roe versus Wade. So he's
complicated guy.
Complicated guy is indeed correct. All right, Stephen, appreciate the time as always, and thanks for backing me up on interest of the Brady Bunch.
Got it.
All right, Stephen Holder from ESPN.com, Colts beat writer, and now Pacers as well. We come back. Over the weekend, I learned of the passing of somebody that I think virtually everyone in Indianapolis is familiar with their work, if not familiar with their name. I'll tell you about it next. Nice job, Corbin. Took me a second there. That is, of course, the Chips soundtrack. I remember, man, Eric Estrada got in his, I think it was an actual motorcycle crash, was it not? Like shortly after that, and I mean, people were just beside themselves. I remember my sisters and I, oh my gosh, Eric Estrada's got to be okay. And he was, obviously. I think Eric Estrada from Chips, wasn't he on a reality show? Wasn't he a police officer in like Muncie for 2 weeks or something? I think that's right. I was actually on my way into work today when I saw a message, a post from Mike Thompson, whose voice you hear on this radio show from our work on Beyond the Bricks. And he had posted about the passing of Larry Henry. And I certainly understand that many of you may be unfamiliar with the name Larry Henry. But Larry Henry is an Indiana guy, and by that I mean a native of Indianapolis, who probably made most name for himself not just in southern Indiana, because he was born and raised in southern Indiana, Austin, Indiana, specifically down near Hanover, and then got into radio working in Columbus, Indiana. Ultimately, his broadcast career would lead him to a very impressive career in the Detroit area, working in broadcasting not only involving the Detroit Lions, but also the University of Michigan, and a lot of work in auto racing around the city of Detroit. He was the preseason television voice for the Detroit Lions for several years. He did work with the Pistons as well, doing radio play-by-play for them. But for the Indianapolis area, I think Larry Henry is probably most known for his work on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network, where he spent different capacities, as we all have done on the network. You know, you kind of move around a little bit, but his home on the network was in turn number 3. From 1982 to 1995, Larry Henry was the turn announcer in turn number 3 of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network. He had been in a different turn in 1981, but there were some great moments that took place between 1982 and 1995 for him to call in turn number 3. Notably, the two that I'm about to play for you. The 1989 Indianapolis 500 came down to a shootout between Allenser Jr., who was looking for his first win, and, well, Emerson Fittipaldi was too, looking for his first win. And Allenser Jr. had taken the lead over Emerson Fittipaldi, but Fittipaldi was reeling him in lap by lap. They were going side by side. What you are about to hear is the conclusion of that race. Now, you will hear the voice of Bob Lamey, who was in turn 2 at that time, as he is describing the action heading to Larry Henry, heading in. And then I believe we may hear 2 different laps here. One of them is coming to the white flag as Allenser Jr. and Fittipaldi are battling. And then the last is coming to the conclusion of the race. I take that back. It might have been 198 and 109, but either way, you're going to hear 2 different laps here. But the race ended essentially, for all intent and purposes, when, of course, Allenser Jr. and Emerson Fittipaldi went into turn number 3 and made contact, and Allenser Jr. crashed. That is the famous race where Jr. then waited, and as the field came by behind the pace car, he stepped out and gave him the thumbs up, as opposed to what everybody anticipated he was about to do. That was not, by the way, I was incorrect, because they were coming around with 1 lap to go there. So it was not on the white flag lap when the crash happened. But either way, you're going to hear 2 different calls from Larry Henry. This is the 1989 Indianapolis 500.
Al trying to move to the outside. Emo cuts him off. Their tail to win. Now Al trying to make the move down the back stretch. He heads toward Larry. Here comes Allenser Jr. on the inside. He's got it. He's got it. He's got it going through 3. They're side by side. Emo on the inside. Al caught in traffic. Goes high. They touch wheels. Oh. Jr. into the wall hard. Emerson Fittipaldi keeps on going. They touch wheels. Al Jr. into the wall, and Emerson Fittipaldi will lead them back to the yellow flag.
That was the 1989 Indianapolis 500-mile race. Larry Henry was in turn number 3. Now, 3 years later would lead to what I believe, without question, there are 2 finishes in Indy 500 history that I think are the pinnacle moments, the absolute gold standard of the radio network call. One is the 1982 finish between Gordon Johncock and Rick Mears, and the other is in 1992, the final lap shootout between, again, Al Unser Jr. and Scott Goodyear. That particular race, I still believe, is the gold standard that all of us aspire towards, to be honest with you. Jerry Baker was in turn number 1 in that particular race in 92. Gary Lee was in turn number 2. Larry Henry in turn 3. Bob Lamey in turn 4. And Bob Jenkins, the chief announcer at that time. But because I believe it is the greatest finish in radio history on that event, or of that event, and because Larry Henry was in turn number 3, I wanted to play the end of the 1992 Indy 500 as well.
The start-finish line. Who's going to get it? Dwayne Sweeney waves the white flag. 1 to go. A 3-car length separation between Unser and Goodyear. And that's how they come through number 1. The gap gets closer and closer and closer in front of Gary Lee. Indeed, about 3 or 4 car lengths as they work off the second corner for the last time. Headed down the backstretch. Headed right at you, Larry Henry. Scott Goodyear tucked right in behind Al Unser Jr. He's waiting about a car length and a half behind Al Jr. Al Jr. now lengthens it out. He's trying to hold him off. Goodyear low, Jr. high. They go to 4, Bob Lamey. Al Unser Jr. has the lead. 1 more turn to go. Here they come. Coming to the finish line. Bob Jenkins, who's going to win it? The checkered flag is out. Goodyear makes a move. Little Al wins by just a few tenths of a second. Perhaps the closest finish in the history of the Indianapolis 500.
So Larry Henry was in turn 3 for that particular event. He passed away over the weekend in Madison, well, actually in Louisville. He was living in Madison in retirement, Indiana. Passed away in Louisville at the age of 73. He is survived by his wife, Penny, and their children. He was a graduate of Rose-Hulman. And I will simply say this, I guess I'll say selfishly speaking, but in terms of personal anecdote to it, I only met Larry Henry on one occasion. And that was at, I believe it was the Milwaukee race a number of years ago. He was there, and it was very shortly after I had assumed the responsibilities of calling turn 3 for the radio network, where he spent 13 races. And I simply said to him what I'll say now, and that is that I am well aware of the gold standard of era of that event and that radio network, and the responsibility that comes with that of, trying to maintain that standard. I'm aware that those guys did it at a level that I never will, quite frankly. I'm very aware of that. But I'm also very appreciative of the place that radio network has within the greatest sporting event in the world, and the very small, very, very, very small personal connection that I can claim to it, but it's because of the guys that you just heard. Those guys were the absolute best. They are still the gold standard to which they allowed a precedent for the rest of us to try to shoot for. I'm not saying we ever will, but I am always appreciative of, respectful of, and most sincere in saying that I thank them for that contribution. And unfortunately, we've lost, a number of those guys that you just heard, Bob Jenkins, Gary Lee, and Larry Henry. But they were the very best. And Larry Henry certainly passing away, but his voice will live for a very, very, very long time in this town in creating great memories for all of us, without question. When we come back, the Fever have a couple of new additions. We'll let you know about that and what the Pacers are gearing up towards as we roll along here. Scott Agnes is going to join us about 20 from now here on Query & Company. Step number one for the signs of spring in Indianapolis. Pacers in the postseason, taking on the Milwaukee Bucks. And then, before we know it, it'll be May, which I love May, right? I mean, who doesn't in Indianapolis love May? But I love everything about it. Already some of the events, different things like starting to come into form. So absolutely look forward to it. Also, before you know it, of course, the Fever season is going to be underway. WNBA draft last night, they added 3 to the fold. Yes, they did not have a first-round pick because they had traded it to Phoenix in the Sophie Cunningham trade. But I think what the Fever did, the WNBA draft is interesting because you think about it and you say, well, they didn't have a first-round pick. Well, this is not the NFL or NBA draft in the fact of the number of players picked. So they have a second-round selection. Well, it's still the 19th overall pick in the draft. So, you're still going to get pretty good players. And I think in Michaela Timpson out of Florida State, did I watch a lot of Florida State women's basketball? I did not. But I know this much. You're talking about a low-post presence power forward that, by all account, from everything that I've read, with an increased offensive game. But I don't think that's – when you have Caitlin Clark in your lineup and you have the players the Fever have, I don't think you're looking necessarily for point production, per se, as much as defensive assistance. And an area where they could use that, not only rebounding, but rim protection, I think one of the better shot blockers – in the draft. So they address that need right away. And I know that I have gone back to this well several times in talking about it. But, for example, if you go all the way back with the Pacers in their, prime year teams, who are 2 of the more important players they've had on their better teams? David West. But then before that, I've told you when the original design of the NBA breakthrough Pacers, having, Donnie Walsh has told me that he believes the most important player that he ever acquired was Dale Davis, because Dale Davis did the little dirty work that your star players aren't doing, right, or that they're not designed to do. And do I think that that's what Timpson is going to be? I'm not saying that, but I think it's what's designed to be, that role, right, of we need the dirty work, presence, low post, force, rim protection. The other thing they could use is assistance in perimeter defense and spot shooting, in particular in transition when you have a Caitlin Clark out there. And Bree Hall, who played at South Carolina, knows Aaliyah Boston, obviously. That was their second overall pick in the draft. They took it right after Timpson, so the 20th overall. They rounded it out with a big-time scorer at forward, the all-time leading scorer at Gonzaga in Gonzaga history, and Yvonne, I believe it's Zijim is how you say her last name, and whether or not that's a position, they don't need really points. That's the only thing there is she's coming into a tough spot because she's coming into a situation or a position where there's a bit of a traffic jam. But, we'll see what happens with that. But I think you have to give credit to them for addressing the needs and shoring out their roster. I mean, this is a roster that, especially once they got Sophie Cunningham, and there was a lot of attention last year for the first time in a long time about the Fever locally, which is great. And I think that they addressed some of the areas that needed to be addressed. Whether that comes to fruition on the court, now we don't know, right? That remains to be seen. I'm sure one of the things that we'll talk about with Scott Agnes. The other thing that we'll talk about with Scott will be the Pacers-Bucks playoff series getting underway Saturday, 1 o'clock, game number 1. And if you are just joining us on the program, then you may have earlier missed this. Just about an hour or so ago, a little over an hour ago, the Milwaukee Bucks offered the following update on Damian Lillard, who is as dangerous a guard as you can find in the NBA, especially when he gets hot. He is a lightning in a bottle guy. When Damian Lillard is on the floor, not unlike prime Reggie Miller, not unlike, to be honest, All-Star game Halliburton of a year ago, and then at times in moments this year with Halliburton, there are certain guys that once they start feeling it, there's nothing you can do but hope they cool off. Because all of a sudden they are like the NBA Jam game where you're on fire and the ball is literally like a flame going through the basket. There's a danger in that, right? In the opposition. And Lillard is that kind of a guy. He can go scoreless for 3.5 quarters and then all of a sudden end with 18 in the final 7 minutes of the game. Like, what just happened? But he has a blood clot that he has been dealing with. And the Milwaukee Bucks issued the following statement. This is on the Expos Twitter. Update. Damian Lillard has made significant improvement on his deep vein thrombosis in his right calf. He will continue to increase his on-court basketball activity. Quote, Damian's most recent weekly scan shows that his injury has significantly improved, which will enable him to move ahead safely with increased basketball activity. Damian's health remains our number one priority. We have followed strict protocols and will continue to do so. We are pleased with the positive news about Damian's progress. End quote. That is from the general manager of the Milwaukee Bucks, John Horst. They later went on to say the team will continue to provide updates as appropriate. So that's the latest on where things stand there. He is obviously going to miss, or is expected to miss, game number 1 Saturday at 1 o'clock. But what does that mean moving forward? We shall see. This is going to be very similar to last year when Giannis was the question mark, and you wondered throughout the course of the series whether or not Giannis would be there. Now it's Lillard and not Giannis that you wonder about his availability. Scott Agnes has availability, and he's going to make it with us next. The afternoon game for the first round of the playoffs almost feels more marquee if it's on a Saturday than the primetime game because it's a Saturday night. People are out and about. And there's something about those, you know, some of the great moments that you think about in Pacers playoff history were afternoon games. Joining us now on the program, Fieldhouse Files, where you can read his work. You hear him, of course, regularly on this radio station. Scott Agnes joining us. Scott, we'll begin with this. I had been saying for a couple of weeks, and I think you disagree with me on this, but going into it, I was saying that I thought maybe I would rather see Milwaukee than Detroit because there's just kind of a known qualifier there in what you're going to face, and Detroit seemed young and just dumb enough that they might be dangerous. But the way Giannis has played for the last 3 weeks, and I'm just kind of spitballing a number there, but roughly the last home stretch of the NBA season, may be the best that he's played in his career if you really look at it. And I think it makes Milwaukee extremely dangerous, even without Damian Lillard. This is a kind of a tiger by the tail with Giannis because he's in that kind of a mode. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. I mean, you're going to look at Giannis finishing probably top 3, if not top 4 for MVP for like the 7th straight year, Jake, and his numbers went up this year, and he's not making up any ground. That's what's remarkable at all this. And I think SGA is going to win MVP, unfortunately. I think it's Jokic personally. But to your point, this is a series coming up where I think you're good if Giannis gets his. What you're not good with is if he also is able to distribute. So he has 40 points and 12 assists.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, he is just so good and continues to get better at age 30.
The thing about him is he has this, first off, it goes without saying, just his ability to get to the basket in general, but he can facilitate and dictate so many things. Guys like Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez is, I'll put it to you this way, Scott, would Brook Lopez be the same player with the same kind of production or danger if it were not for Giannis on the floor?
I think he would be about the same. Where I give him so much credit is how he's evolved his game. How he is a 3-point threat. Remember, like he went from the typical big back to the basket post, good handle, good hook shot, that sort of thing, to now where he's extended his game to meet the modern game. That's where
you're talking about Lopez, right?
Correct. That's where I give Brook Lopez a ton of credit.
Brook Lopez, to me, I can't figure out each time I watch him play, and we've now got at minimum 4 and possibly 7 games for you to watch and figure this out. Does Brook Lopez look more like Frederick Sykes, the one-armed man in The Fugitive, or Screech?
I have to Google real fast Frederick Sykes to figure that one out.
Just put in Fugitive one-armed man and tell me it doesn't look kind of like Brook Lopez.
Doing that this moment.
Scott's typing as we speak.
Great radio.
Yeah.
I'm going to go more with Screech.
Really? You don't think he looks like the one-armed man?
No, I see it totally. I do.
Yeah.
Now, right. I don't know where you pulled that one from, but that was impressive.
Well, it's what I do, Scott, right?
Your memory, yeah.
Indiana in this, if you look at the regular season, Pacers, Bucks, Scott Agnes, our guest, 3 of 4 Milwaukee wins, but there were kind of weird circumstances with that. Pacers weren't always healthy for them. Pacers had some, second half of back-to-back nights when Milwaukee did not. Does Indiana, for the most part, go in as who they are and say, here we are, we're going to try this again for a 5th time, or do they make adjustments and tweaks and kind of redefine and come out as a different style than what worked for them in the regular season?
No, I think we know exactly who they are and what they want to be about. I think the difference is 1 year ago, they were just happy to be there. They were happy-go-lucky, right? Like, hey, we made the playoffs. That was our goal. That was our stated goal from the season. And then they obviously exceeded that. Now they come in, and they're not going to surprise anyone. It's completely understood what they will look like. And on top of that, remember, Siakam is not new to the fold anymore. And they got Benedict Mathurin. So they got better, And although we didn't see Giannis in the postseason last year, now we probably won't see Damian Lillard again. We don't know with his health and blood clots. I just can't imagine a player coming back who hasn't played in over a month with all this. And then on top of that, Bobby Portis is reacclimating after being suspended for what was a couple of months. And he's going to be the agitator in the series. There's no doubt in my mind, Jake, he's going to get a flagrant one. He's going to get tossed one of those games. How do the Pacers handle their composure from that moment, or the multiple moments that happen each game, will be also key in all this. But to your original point, no, the Pacers know exactly who they are and how they got to beat them.
James Johnson notwithstanding, okay, and I mean that is no disrespect to James Johnson because, we've talked about his leadership. But in terms of guys that get legitimate minutes for the Pacers, everybody kind of needs a Bobby Portis, truth be told. And by that I mean the guy that is the thorn in the opponent's side. Who is the Pacers' Bobby Portis?
I would say from an action standpoint, it's Tyrese, right? Because he plays into that WWE factor where he's joking with someone in the crowd or he's talking smack with somebody, and then maybe he knocks down a three that just frustrates you. From a quiet standpoint, it's Andrew Nembhard. He's getting under your skin, he's getting a stop, he's frustrating the heck out of you, and if you come at him, he's coming right back at you.
Yeah, I guess Nembhard has had a couple of those. I'm trying to think. Where was it this year where who was it he threw the ball at and got ejected? Do you remember
that? Minnesota?
It was Gobert. You're correct. It was Rudy Gobert, right? Yeah, Minnesota. Yep.
Yeah.
So clearly not afraid to back down, right?
No, not at all. And in fact, the funny part to me about all this, Andrew Nembhard leads the Pacers in technical fouls this season. I bet nobody would have guessed that if you gave them 5 guesses.
Here's a good trivia question for you, Scott. You ready?
Bring it.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you mind that? If you can, I'm giving you the option to retreat from this if you'd like. But I think you'll know the answer, actually.
Okay. I'll give it a whirl. I'm not the greatest at trivia, but I'll try.
What former Pacer holds the NBA record for most games played without ever accumulating a technical foul? And I don't mean
Travis Best.
No, what I mean is amongst players who have never received a technical foul, this player played the most games in his NBA career.
I don't know why, but Travis Best was the immediate name that came to mind.
It's a great guess because Travis Best just seemingly always a happy guy, right? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's what I will tell you this. Same position, but before Travis Best.
Okay.
How about this? What former Pacer and Olympian holds the NBA record for most games played without ever receiving a technical foul?
Chris Mullin's the name that comes to mind there.
Another outstanding guess. Incorrect. Same position as Travis Best.
Oh, man.
Okay, I'll
now
give you
I'm probably missing something.
We'll go one step further, and by no means, I mean, Scott, this is an extremely obscure question. What former Pacer and Olympian holds the NBA record for most games played without a technical foul, much to the delight, presumably, of his twin brother?
Van Arsdale or one of those?
Nope.
No. You got me here.
That'd be, when I say it, Scott, you literally are going to be like, oh, my gosh. You're going to facepalm yourself. Vern Fleming, baby. Vern Fleming. That's why it's a great trivia question, though, right? Has anybody ever heard Vern Fleming speak? You know what I mean? Now you know why he's never gotten a tackle.
I wouldn't know. No, I'm not sure I would recognize. I know I would not recognize his voice.
Very quiet dude, for sure. Very quiet dude.
No.
Who's the most important player in this series not named Tyrese Halliburton or Pascal Siakam?
You got to go on the wing and whoever's stopping Giannis, right? So I'd probably go with Aaron Nesmith. I'd go the defensive end here. We know what Pascal, we know what Tyrese can provide. It's got to be the defensive end of the floor. I guess I look at Miles and Brook Lopez kind of canceling each other out.
Right.
Similarly, maybe an Obi Toppin and Bobby Portis crossing each other out. So to me, it's that wing defender as usual. I come back to a center theme I always go back to, but to me, that's it. And then you need that bench to be more sound than it's been. That's the one thing that has concerned me, given the recent circumstances. I do understand it a little bit, but the last couple of weeks when the bench is really struggling with third units, And guys are coming in and out of the group. That group has to be solidified. Matherin's got to be solid. McConnell's got to be productive in his 15 minutes. But to me, it's out on the wing.
Jarris Walker has enough size and has shown an increased competency defensively. Does he have the lateral quickness to be able to be one that can, by rotation, check up on Giannis?
Ooh. I think Giannis would take advantage of his youth and inexperience. I do. I think he would just walk to the free throw line, essentially. I think you could throw him out there. He'd be good in maybe a switch situation in spurts, but I want someone a little bit more experienced, a little bit more physical, I think. Jarris will have a place, I do believe, in this series.
That's what I was going to ask. The next thing, Scott, is as the rotation shrinks, who gets left out?
Oof. Yeah. I think you could see T.J. McConnell's had a lot of good games against the Bucks in history. That's the thing you got to remember there. I think he had a triple-double or 30 points against them. That was one name that came to mind if you try to shrink the rotation. Ben Shepherd, I think, would be an obvious one, except the fact that you lean on him in defense. But we got to see where he's at. Obviously, he hadn't played over the last couple of games as he had an injury they wanted to take care of. But I would think it's one of the guards maybe, and Shepherd or McConnell has limits reduced a little bit further.
Scott, what's your favorite playoff series not named Pacers-Bucks?
First of all, I'm not a fan of these play-in games. I know we get started with those tonight, but those to me aren't that interesting. Outside of, I think I got to go to the Western Conference where things were much more jumbled up to get to the postseason, and then I go with Nuggets Clippers from the 4-5 game. People around here maybe not watching the Clippers a ton, but Kawhi has been playing great basketball. The Clippers have been really good. They have the exact same record, and then we know all the chaos that has ensued with the Nuggets. Can Jokic hold them together? Do they totally just lay an egg here? But that's a 4-5 matchup, same exact record. To me, that's the one that I'm really looking forward to. Yeah. What about you?
Well, okay, a couple of things. Number one, Zubac is really good for the Clippers. That's another player that, unless you were following the Clippers or him, you would not realize how effective he is. But,
yeah,
a big that can, quite frankly, can kind of control things for them in certain games. But yes,
Pacer
Kawhi,
fans are very familiar with him, right? I think he went for, 20 rebounds? 30 points and 20 rebounds last year against them?
Yeah, he puts up huge numbers, man. And, he's not a star by any stretch, but a really good player. I would agree with you on the play-in games. I think it's a little bit confusing. I also think, if you're a team that came out of your conference as the 8th best season, I think that merits getting outright a playoff berth. It's less about matchups to me and more about the intrigue of a couple of teams. I'm intrigued to see what Detroit can do against New York. And whether or not Tom Thibodeau just has worn down the Knicks to this point. And I'm intrigued also by the fact, Scott, I'm convinced you could ask 1,000 people that have gone to an NBA game this year. If you buy a Major League Baseball ticket anywhere at any point in your lifetime, somehow you get onto a mailing list of an email list of Major League Baseball teams.
And you cannot get rid of it.
It's unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable. Yep. I have no idea how you get rid of it. So if you had that for the NBA and you were able to email NBA ticket buyers this year, how many of them would be able to tell you that the Houston Rockets are the 2 seed in the West?
Not a ton, and nobody expected it. They've done a phenomenal job, and just one All-Star on that roster.
But young, right? They have a very young team.
For sure. Absolutely. So that could go both ways. It could mean this team makes an incredible run to, say, the conference finals, or – yeah, they're just not quite ready for the big stage. I'll add one more to this conversation. It's Steph Curry and the Warriors. What do they do in the play-in? Do they even make it? He's 0-3 in these play-in games, and that would be the argument against these. Is they're the 7 seed out west right now. You want Steph Curry in the playoffs. Everybody does, including the NBA. And so for them, if they would miss out, especially after trading away and going and get Jimmy Butler, that would be a huge story.
Okay, here's another story that's kind of intriguing to me. What happened to Minnesota? And I know that sounds weird to say about a team that is solidly in the playoffs. They're the 6th seed. They take on the Lakers. But, it wasn't long ago that we were thinking to ourselves, okay, they have made the big step. They have Anthony Edwards, who is a rising the guy. What happened?
Right? No, I'm right there with you. First of all, the NBA's waiting for that next guy to kind of take over, and you thought it was going to be John Morant. You thought it was going to be Anthony Edwards. It's probably going to be Victor Wembanyama, although you'd like to give him 2 or 3 more years, I think, until he's forced in that conversation as like a 23-year-old here upcoming. But, yeah, there's a lot with the Timberwolves, and they made that trade before the season. And so that's kind of what you'll look upon here as you moved on from Cat and got Julius Randle, and you got an aging Mike Conley here locally of note. But is Anthony Edwards ready to take them back? And do they have enough firepower now to defeat the Lakers, who are playing really good basketball? Again, if I had an MVP vote, I have no problem with voters who had LeBron maybe in 5th. This team was not expected to be a top 5 team out in the West, and obviously they brought in Luka Doncic for sure. But to be 3rd out West has been remarkable.
Listen, I know he's a polarizing figure, and that comes with simply being in the limelight for 20 years, Scott. And it disappoints me for people that and I'm not going to go off on my praise of LeBron rant because I've done it 10,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish people could just simply look at it and say and understand the rarity of what we're seeing. For someone at his age to put up the numbers and the consistent production that he is, truthfully, is remarkable.
The dude is 40 years old, 40 and a half, and he's been able to do what he's done, been atop the mountain for so long without any public missteps. Sure, he said things or had some actions that he'd probably take back, but who among us hasn't over that type of length here? And so for him to go to the Lakers, to now be committed to them for a while, he's been there last, half dozen years or so. Probably will finish his career there. It's been so much. I understand Pacer fans right around here because he knocked them out for like 7 years in a row, essentially. And so there's obviously some bad blood between Pacer fans and him getting in the way when they were there in 14. And then, again, I think it was like 17 when Cleveland didn't have a good team, but he beat them in 7 games, and you had that goaltending questionable call and all of that. So I understand Pacer fans' frustrations, but it's a constant reminder, Jake, to appreciate it and don't let these moments and these big games by LeBron or others to just be like, yeah, just another game.
Now, Scott, I'm doing something. Scott Agnes, our guest, Fieldhouse Files, where you can read his work. Before we let you go, I will tell you, I'm doing something later today that I'm going to bet that you maybe have done, and I'm terrified about it. I'm terrified about it. I get what's called sleep anxiety. At least I just self-diagnosed that, where I know I have to do something that is out of my comfort zone, and I lose sleep for like a day, festering about it and worrying about it. One of them is like emceeing events. Terrified of that, right? The other one, and I want to know if you've done it, and then if you haven't, if you'd be willing to come by and relieve me in case I can't make it past like the first 2 things here. You ready? I am actually going to do in the public address announcements, meaning the walk-up and at-bat announcements for the North Central High School softball game today.
That's awesome. You're going to have so much fun. Don't be nervous at all.
Have you ever done it?
I did. I did North Central football for 2 years.
Dude, I'm going to be terrible, and B, I don't know what all, like I don't have to be Shecky, right? Like I don't have to sit there and be all fancy, right? Can I just be standard fare, like now batting? The third baseman. Additionally, if it's
keeping it
if it's
simple
softball, is
and
it third base woman?
Is
it third base woman or third baseman? Or just third base? Third base
now
fielder?
on third
what do you
base.
Say?
Third baseman.
But it's not a baseman though, right? It's a base woman, right?
That's a question for your PR director.
See, this is the kind of stuff, Scott. This is the kind of stuff why I'm staying up late at night, right? They
That's
asked me.
a great question.
So Dan Pantos, who's a colleague of ours here, puts these. His daughter plays on the team, and he's been doing it. And he's like, "Hey, would you want to come in and do it for a little bit?" And I said, "Sure." And then I thought, well, now why do I commit myself to these things? Because I'm not going to sleep for a week.
I think the good part about it is you've done so many things, but this is a little different, so it gets you out of your comfort zone, and I think that's healthy every once in a while. I like it. I just keep it simple, and if you have any questions, ask your friend right there before you get started, and you'll be good.
I don't know.
How many of these high schools are having high school kids do it? You're a professional broadcaster who's on probably the most listened to broadcast annually. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like it would be. I think you'll be okay.
I appreciate that, honestly, and I'm not saying it, but I just it's for those reasons that I want to make sure that I do it properly for the kids that are coming to bat, right? And as somebody whose last name is Query, I'm very cognizant of what happens when you just make a slight mispronunciation of someone's last name and the connotation it can have. Like, I want to be very specific and careful with this. That's all.
And that's that's almost rule number one for broadcasters, right? Is get the name right. Because everybody wants their name right. Their parents want their kid's name right.
Now they did tell me this, though, Scott. I'm not saying things have changed since we were in high school, but they did tell me when North Central is coming to bat after the first inning that then it gets easier because they all play their own walk-up music. Now that's new, right? What would your walk-up song be?
Heart of a Champion, maybe?
Okay.
I don't know. That's one of my buddies had that in high school. I do remember that. And so, of course, I would love that.
Would it be weird if my walk-up song was Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston just because I want people to know that the greatest love of all is, in fact, I Love Me?
It reminds me of Andrew Nemhard picking Wonderwall when he's introduced for Pacer games, if you've noticed that.
Which I've got nothing wrong with that, though, because at least he's going with Oasis, right?
Yeah, and that's something new. That's something new they've done over the last couple of years is occasionally mix in, instead of one constant song, is to allow each of the players kind of pick their own theme as they come out for 5 seconds.
And Tyrese Halliburton is insistent that they say he's number O and not number 0, correct?
That's right. I believe so.
Okay.
For Oshkosh, Wisconsin is the reason.
Oh, really? Bagosh. I didn't know that, Bagosh. See what I did there? Scott Agnes, Fieldhouse Files, where you can read it. Lastly, Scott, upcoming leading into the playoffs, your coverage will involve what, or you're working on what?
Yeah, so I'll do a podcast, obviously, previewing the series and get a Bucks perspective, right? Because a lot of fans probably aren't watching them regularly, so I want to do that. And then I think my next featured story will just be about how much has changed in a year and how they go in now to this playoff series, Jake, completely confident and sure of themselves and are not just happy to be there.
By the way, this from my buddy Bruce Kidd, who very generously, by the way, kicked off the donations. Thank you to everybody who has contributed so far. We're halfway through the month. I'll give you an update here in just a little bit for Firefly, for our month campaign to help out the good kids at Firefly. He says, Brooke Lopez with facial hair looks like the Geico caveman. That seems a little bit offensive, but it's probably accurate, right?
He's a kid at heart, though. I think he would have fun with that. Remember, he has a house on Disney's premises with his brother because they love Disney World so much.
Is that why? Somebody told me they saw him there and he was kind of aloof, and I'm like, well, he's hanging out on vacation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Brooke and Robin, I believe they share a house. I'm not certain about that.
His brother is no longer playing, correct?
That sounds right.
I mean, Brooke, the better of the two, I've always felt.
He was on the team last year, I believe.
Really?
Yeah. Because that was one of the fun stories is they were teammates. But, yeah, that's right. Robin is not in the league this year.
Okay.
Played just 16 games last season with the Bucks.
Fair enough. Stanford guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Wow. I just looked up Robin Lopez. He looks like Brooke Lopez with a wig.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right, Scott. Yeah. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Jake.
Hey, Jake. This is from my buddy Greg Pulley. I've PA'd many softball games, and I always say first, second, third baseman. Even if it's man, it's the same as woman, in my opinion. Okay, fair. Do I just say, what if there's a really tricky name, though? Do I write it out phonetically? Or do I come up with a cute nickname for it?
You should write it out phonetically.
Corbin, you should be doing this. You have a better voice than me. Let me give you, just for example, Corbin, if you could. Let's just say, do you have a sister by chance?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's say that your sister is the shortstop, and what's her favorite number? Do you know?
4.
So I want you to announce for me, Corbin, your sister coming to bat as the shortstop number 4, and do it in your best PA voice. This is Corbin Lingenfelter. Go ahead.
And stepping up to the plate, number 4, Stephanie Lingenfelter at shortstop.
Okay. See, I can't do that. I would just be I'd go Chuck Crabb. You know what I mean? Now batting, a 5'10" sophomore, number 4, Stephanie Lingenfelter. That's how I'll do it, right? And then everybody will be like, well, "What is this? Why is this guy doing it this way?" I'm telling you, I'm a nervous wreck over it. I don't want to say that I'm hoping for rain, but I'm kind of hoping that, like, I get a message like, hey, guess what? We've been rained out, and I'm off the hook. I'm nervous about that, and I'm nervous about the fact that the IRS doesn't show that my payment yet for taxes has gone through, and I made it a while ago. Should I be nervous about that?
Well, it is April 15th, and they were due today, so.
But I paid it a while ago, and I'm like, wait a minute. If they haven't showed it as posted yet, then does that mean that I'm going to get dinged like I didn't pay it on time, even though my bank says that it went through a while ago?
It could. Your nerve levels should be generally rising as the week goes along.
Do you think there's funny business going on there?
I don't know. Did you add another zero when you shouldn't have?
I don't. Well, they'd love that. That would mean I'm paying even more, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's on the left-hand side of the column, I guess. Hey, Jake, get with the coach prior to the game and write it phonetically. Okay, there we go. I just hope that every player, I hope that the softball player, I hope there are 9 Smiths, right? A couple of Jones, a Johnson. I'm very nervous about this. And how long does a softball game take? Do we know?
Mine usually lasted about an hour and a half, 2 hours when I was calling them in Jasper.
Press box won't be heated, right? Going to be chilly?
It depends on the stadium. I had heated press boxes. I had AC press boxes. And ice cream.
Hey, Jake, when you were out yesterday, the first time that Corbin spoke, I thought it was just him making fun of you. It took me a while to realize that's his real voice. Did you speak yesterday in mockery of me?
I did not. Derek did. I did not.
That doesn't surprise me at all. All right, yesterday I did something I haven't done in a long time, and it led me to have another one of my late-night brain-dropping questions that I'm going to ask for everybody because I'm seeking an answer. So brush up on your knowledge of the obscure because I've got a great question for you next. Hell yeah. There's my walk-up song. The greatest love of all with me, right? Hey, Jake, be sure to get the names correct or you'll hear screaming from the crowd. Yes, I know. That's my worry. And then my mom asked, hi, Jake, it's Mom. Now, are you announcing a game? No, I'm just doing the PA for an inning. They said an inning. I was like, I'll do more than an inning, but I'm just introducing the batters as they walk up at the North Central softball game today. So let me tell you what happened recently to me. And then it hit me last night at 2:38 in the morning. I had a brain dropping. And I thought, this is the kind of thing I can ask on the – I thought if there's only somebody I could ask about this. And then I said to myself, Jake, you have access to a radio audience that may have at least one person that knows the answer to this. So here's what I was thinking about. Yesterday, I took the personal day off. Not, and I'm very appreciative of it. Not because I had a red eye, which I did coming back from Long Beach. So I left. My flight was scheduled to leave LAX at 11:50 p.m. Pacific. So that's 2:50 here, right? Well, Ryan Marine, my colleague on the radio network, he had to go from LAX. How about this? He had to go from LAX to London because he was doing a Formula E event. So he had a direct flight from LA to London. It's like an 11-hour flight. And his flight was at 9 p.m. The challenge with LA is you don't know when you are trying to get to LAX. You try to give yourself – sometimes you may go and there's no traffic and boom, no problem. And then other times you get stuck in traffic and you're there for 2 hours. So you have to really run – it's literally like a gamble. And – Ryan, knowing that he had to get there by 9, I'm like, well, we probably should start heading towards LAX by like 6:30 because security and everything else. So we got to the airport at, I don't know, 7:30. Fine for Ryan's flight, but my flight wasn't until close to midnight. And I already returned the rental car, so I'm like, I mean, where am I? And you just, I didn't want to go venture back out because you just never know how long you're going to get stuck. And if you've ever done the rental car return and the shuttle bus at LA, I mean, it's a nightmare. So the point I'm getting at here is I had like 5 hours to kill at the airport. So after I got something to eat and then did like a way too expensive massage chair and whatever else, I'm going a little bit stir crazy. And I said, you know what? There's got to be an earlier flight because if I'm going to, I was laid over in Chicago. I went through Chicago on the way back. If I'm going to have time to kill, I might as well do it in the Chicago airport than just continuing to wait around here. So I went and got on an earlier flight, which got me out of there, thank goodness. But then I had more time to kill, and I knew that I was killing time when I was eating a sausage McMuffin without egg at 4:45 in the morning at O'Hare. You're looking around and you're like, I'm. And then I thought to myself, I can't even judge at 4:30 in the morning if there's somebody drinking a beer in a bar at the airport because their body clock, it might be midnight. You have no idea. People are traveling from all over. People are all over the place. But the main reason why I took yesterday as a personal day was not because I took the red eye, because I can go through the inertia and the energy for 3 hours. It was because I had to go to the dentist again, and there's only so many time frames or days of availability for what I needed to get done. And when you work 12 to 3, it's tough, right? I can't do it in the morning because I come in and I sound like this, and everybody be like, Gray's been drinking before he went in there. No, they numb my mouth, right? So here's the epiphany brain dropping I had last night in the wee hours of the morning as I was staring at the ceiling. Thank you. Whenever you hear about someone, and I hate to say it this way, it sounds a little morbid, right? But whenever something happens where someone needs to be identified posthumously, they always say that they were confirmed by their dental records, right? Police found the man unidentified, but was able, they were able to identify who it was via dental records. And I'm not trying to be humorous about the horrible atrocities that would lead to that kind of a circumstance. But then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, who has these dental records, and where do they, like, for example, if you're somebody that moves all the time, when you move to a new city, these dental records, are they just on like a file cabinet at your old dentist from where you used to live? And what if that dentist's office doesn't realize that you've now moved to Austin, Texas, and they haven't heard from you in a year? Did they pitch your dental records? These are very important records that may be needed for, like, if you're 45 years old and you go to the dentist, and then let's say that you begin practicing a new religion that no longer believes in dentistry, okay? Which, these days, who knows, right? So you do that, and now you're 85, and some sort of terrible thing happens where you need to be identified based on your dental records. Is there an archive somewhere that these go? Who has the dental records? Where are they stored? And then furthermore, what is it about your teeth that makes your dental records so unique? How is one's mouth like a snowflake where everyone is different? I mean, in your dental records, does it simply say, like, Corbin, how many cavities have you had in your lifetime as an adult?
2.
2, okay? So let's say you've got them on teeth 6 and 13, okay? Are we to pretend that you're the only person on planet Earth that has cavities in teeth 6 and 13? What in your dental records exactly indicate? How do they know your dental records? How are they different than somebody else who has cavities in the same 2 teeth? What is it that makes it different, and where are these records exactly? Where are they stored? That's an incredible responsibility, right? You hold within your hands the potential identification for someone for the rest of their lifetime. Where do they go? Is there an archive? Is there a database? Like, if we can identify any person based on their dental records, then why do we have, like, missing, the like DNA testing and all that? Why is that necessary if we're all just in the same dental record database? Haven't you ever am I the only one that wonders about this? Like, what is it that makes your teeth? Can somebody with a dental degree, or even if you've just taken a Sally Struthers class, can somebody that knows dentistry let me know what it is about your dental record that's different than anybody else's? Like your third cuspid has a bigger bite accentuation than your tooth 7, and that makes you I don't know. What is it? Is it the landscape of your teeth? Do they do like an imprint of the landscape of your teeth, and therefore then they are able to determine exactly? And what happens if you get a tooth knocked out? What happens? What if you have veneers? Does that change your dental records? Are you off the system there? Have you ever thought about this, Corbin? You're looking at the floor now, and I can't tell if you're perplexed or if you're saying to yourself, now that's a brain drop and I'm on board with.
That is a brain drop and I'm on board with.
Thank you. Jake, the fact that this keeps you awake at night, no. It's not. There's nothing funny about it. It's terrible. I'm telling you, this is why I don't get any sleep. I sit there and I lay to myself at night and I'm like, you know what? I'd like to floss my teeth tonight. But unfortunately, if the dental records indicate that my back left molar needs flossing, I don't want to screw up the records. They might need them somewhere, right? And who has the records? If you don't go to the dentist, or if you change it, what if your dentist goes out of business, right? What if you go to a dentist that's no longer around? What does he do with the records? That's important stuff he's got. That's an entire generation of recognition and confirmation of identity that he or she holds within their filing cabinet. Where does it go? Furthermore, if you don't have tattoos or dental records, are you basically legally immune? If you have no tattoos and you never have had any dental records imprinted about you, are you basically living anonymously? Is there no tracking who and where you are? Because I told you the only reason I don't have a tattoo is because I never know when I may be a fugitive of the law. Rick Carlisle talked about the Pacers-Bucks series, and one of the things that's keeping perhaps him up at night, it does not involve dental records, but I'll let you know what he said next. Hey, Jake. Your dental records can easily be sent from one dentist to the next electronically. No, I'm aware. But who does that? Where does that responsibility fall? Like if my dentist, this isn't the case, but if I didn't like my dentist and I just decided, I'm going to go to a different dentist, and I go to the new dentist, is it that dentist's responsibility to find out from the old dentist where my dental records are and get them forwarded? What if I go to a dentist that's bougie and I don't want people knowing I go to that dentist and I don't tell anybody? Then something happens to me and they need my dental records, but nobody knows that I actually was going to this bougie dentist, right? Honestly, like somewhere in Washington, D.C., is that the National Archive of Dental Records? Now, you said you looked this up on the FBI website there, Corbin, is that right?
Yeah, the FBI says that the law enforcement agencies can submit a request for missing or unidentified people through the NICS, but it didn't say exactly how they got those.
Right. It just says that I get it that they're, sure. I'd like Jennifer Aniston's dental records, right? Okay. Where do I go about getting them? And who's holding on to them? Where are they currently? That's all I'm getting at, right? I find it fascinating. Rick Carlisle was on the morning show this morning with James, Jeff, and Kevin, and they were discussing, just the fact that Giannis is obviously a major, major factor for the Bucks. I found it fascinating, and I thought James Boyd asked the question of the day because when discussing and breaking down NBA playoff matchups, one of the things that I think is truly fun in a playoff series is the storylines change from one game to the next, the chess match that goes on. And James asked a question about exactly that. Can it get too dangerous to getting too caught up in that versus who you are? I thought that was a fabulous question, and Rick Carlisle began by telling the guys the area in particular defensively that he feels like is maybe a Pacers strong suit or is one that they need to lean in on here in the postseason before James got to the question about balance that Carlisle answered. This is Rick Carlisle from earlier this morning on the wake-up call with James, Kevin, and Jeff this morning on this radio station.
Transition defense, and I've told you guys this during the year, is transition D is probably as important a defensive coverage as we have. And, a lot of people look at that and say, well, of course you got to get back, but getting back and finding a man, not just your man, and making sure that everyone is covered is a really big deal. So, look, those basics are going to be very important. Plus, we'll get to, tune up some other things this week, maybe do a few tweaks here and there. But this is not going to be about gimmicks. This is going to be about us bearing down and executing our style to the highest possible level we can.
Rick, to that point, and maybe can you expand on it a bit, what is the balance of remaining who you are, but also realizing that it is a matchup, and the playoff matchup, seeing a team for 2 weeks is different than seeing them, for 2 or 3 times over an extended period of time throughout the season?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of adjusting. I would assume back and forth. You got a guy like Giannis, and right now against double teams, he is as good as anyone in the league. He's right up there with Jokic just in terms of his execution against double teams in the last 6 or 7 games. A guy like that averages 13 assists a game over a stretch, of must-win games. That's impressive. So it isn't that you just go get the ball out of his hands every single time, because he is throwing these darts, these cross-court darts to the opposite corner for threes, and he's throwing, darts to guys like Lopez dive into the hoop and stuff like that. So, we're going to have to be very mindful about everything that's going on. There are probably going to be stretches where we're going to have to try to play him straight up, which is, it's really in the last 7 or 8 years has been almost impossible. But again, it's going to come down to our team versus their team. But they've got a guy that's really, every year he's in the MVP conversation. So he's a big challenge.
Yeah, and he's had, talking about Giannis, especially down the stretch here, I'm worried about it. I'll be honest with you. I think, I said repeatedly and continue to say repeatedly that I thought Detroit was the team that almost worried me more because there's just something about the Pistons, kind of being like too naive to know that, that they're not supposed to be there. But Giannis scares me. And I think he's a fabulous talent. I mean, I love watching the guy play. But, man, the level that he's been on, the tear that he's been on, if you really look down the stretch at the Bucks and the way that they have played in the last, to secure where they are in the playoff seeding, and you look at his numbers throughout that, he's been on a totally different level. And Giannis is a great player, and Giannis is a guy that already we know, historically has gotten them a championship, through a 50-point Game 7 performance. And even with that, this may be the best stretch that I can recall him having. He's been that good, not just in all statistics, between assists, as you heard Carlisle mention there, rebounding, scoring, just on and on and on. It is literally, he is on a totally different level. But it's great. Look, and if the Pacers drop Game 1 on Saturday, and you'll hear me say this plenty over the course of the week, but if they do, then you're going to look at it and say, oh, man, they're behind the 8 ball. Well, think about a year ago. A year ago, the Pacers went into Milwaukee and laid an absolute egg in Game 1. Siakam was the only guy that was in the state of Wisconsin, and that's Tyrese Halliburton's home state. Everybody else seemingly stayed home, and you thought to yourself, oh, man, like it's great they got in the postseason, but, boy, they were not ready. That was the thought at the time for, a minute. And then they obviously came back. They win that series. It was a great series. And for the most part, the cast of characters from Milwaukee is the same. But Damian Lillard, you had Lillard then, and Giannis was out. Now it's the other way around. So not really the same cast of characters, but I'm saying the minor characters, if you will. Patrick Beverley, is gone. He's throwing basketballs at people in Europe or a G League or something. But Lillard was so dangerous because you knew what he was able to do. And then you flip that. Lillard, to me, I almost feel like Lillard being on the floor, and I certainly hope the best for him in terms of his health and a blood clot. That's a very serious issue. The Bucks issued statement today that they are happy with his progress, but he is still going to be out for, at the minimum, the beginning of the series, if not the entire series. But with Damian Lillard, when he's on the floor with Giannis, at least then, crazy as it sounds, but it takes a little off of Giannis. Giannis is one of the few players in the NBA that is definitely capable himself of just saying, I'm just going to put this on my back and we're going to go. And you really can't stop him when he decides to do that. And having a guy like Lillard out there kind of takes that off of him a little bit. That's what worries me, is that he's going to say that, and he is the best player in the series. And Halliburton's a wonderful player. Siakam's a wonderful player. And, Turner's a great player. But Giannis is the best player in the series, and he is the one guy that is certainly capable of putting them on his back. It'll be a fun series for sure, but it worries me. It does. And listen, I really want them to advance and go on and play presumably Cleveland and just see where the chips fall. John is up next. J&V will be in, talking obviously about this and more. NFL draft upcoming. Thanks again to Scott Agnes for his time earlier today. Thanks to Stephen Holder. If you're going to the North Central softball game, don't laugh at me. I'm a nervous wreck about doing the PA, but I will do the best I can. I'll let you know tomorrow how it goes. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.